Next, let's talk about vendor takebacks, Patrick. This is a tactic that's near and dear to my heart because if I didn't know about this tactic, I would not be in real estate today. In my very first real estate deal, I needed to execute on a vendor takeback in order to get into the market. And right now, this is a time when a vendor takeback mortgage is a fantastic idea and definitely is open to certain people, but it's something that has a window of opportunity. What I mean by that is this tactic typically works better in down markets like we're in right now. Not like a year ago, you would be hard pressed to do a vendor take back deal. But in today's market, people are open to vendor take back deals because properties are not moving as fast and people are not getting as much for their properties. Therefore, they're open to a vendor take back. So let's start, Patrick. Tell us, what is a vendor take back real quick?
Well, there's different levels of vendor take back mortgage, but ultimately what's happening, and to your point, JG, when I bought my first property or one of my first properties, I used a vendor take back mortgage, which is to say this. In my case, the property had been paid off and it was an investor that owned that property. They didn't want to get set up for capital gains, and I had put a great offer on the table for them saying, I'll buy the property, you carry the mortgage. So in this case, the vendor became the bank. I agreed to an interest rate, I agreed to a term, and an amortization I used for the math was 25 years in my case, but ultimately the vendor becomes the bank. And then typically that doesn't happen all that often, other than it's a great exit strategy for some investors because they want to defer that capital gains tax up to 5 years, by the way, by following that strategy. Now, the other side of that is on a vendor take back mortgage where you're dealing with somebody who you can't or you don't want to necessarily go to the bank for the full amount of a mortgage, or you can't qualify, and the vendor actually carries a portion of that mortgage. They agree to carry some portion of it and you pay it on that regard.
Well, here's a good example, Patrick. You know, when you talk about people not being able to qualify for maybe 80% or 95% of a mortgage because they don't meet the qualification ratios because the banks have different qualification ratios. If you went to the bank and you weren't asking for 95%, you were asking for 50%, that's a very different scenario, Patrick. So, quick little example of how a vendor takeback or a VTB can work very much in your favor as a buyer and as a seller, because you talked about the tax consequences, Patrick, but there's also a cash flow and a wealth effect component to VTB's vendor takebacks that people don't understand, which is, let's just say I own this building outright, okay? And I want to sell it. I want to get out from this building because let's just say I'm liquidating my portfolio, and over the course of the next 10 years, I'm going to start selling off buildings. I want to sell this building, but I don't want $1 million of cash in my bank account. I mean, it doesn't serve me to have $1 million of cash in my bank account. I'm actually more interested in saying, listen, I'll get rid of this building. I will sell you this building and I will finance a good chunk of it for you. That way I get residual cash flow over the course of the next 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. It helps my tax consequence. It helps my cash flow. It helps me make a plan in the future for this money. It's really a win-win for both the buyer and the seller. The thing is most people don't understand vendor takebacks. Most realtors don't understand vendor takebacks. And as a result, that's where deals break down. But sophisticated investors can explain the tactic, and as a result, deals get done.
100%. And we see it done within the REIN community all the time. And, what's really great is that, when it even comes from a raising capital point of view, all of these tactics that we're talking about, by the way, there's a lot of capital sitting on the sidelines. And when you can start to offer these strategies to your capital partner, where you've got a plan, you've got an exit strategy, a vendor take back, like any of it is all part of what you can fold into a joint venture. And that's why vendor takebacks are becoming more popular through these times, because people need to exit, as again, for all the reasons they need to. And with the financing challenges that we're facing, it's a strategy that we got to embrace.
Yeah. And I think the important thing with all these strategies, folks, as we're trying to point out is, when we say there are problems, don't think of these as only negative problems like a death or a divorce or some type of, there could be a challenge, like, for example, having too much money in the bank. That is a problem. Huh? It's a good problem, but it's a problem. And a VTB is a solution to that. So vendor take back, fantastic tactic. Patrick, I'm really glad we talked about VTBs. One of my favorites, near and dear to my heart.
If you're interested in learning about investing in real estate the right way, look at our Real Estate Investing in Canada program. 15 steps to successfully investing in real estate. Thousands of real estate investors have learned the right way to invest in real estate following those 15 steps. You're absolutely going to love that program. Take a look, click on the link in the description below.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please like and subscribe. And if you've enjoyed this, please share it with someone that you know, because it's going to be incredibly valuable to them. Also, we'd love to hear from you, so please comment below. If you want to see more stuff like this, click here. If you want to see the entire show, click there.